Picture it. You are standing in a skincare aisle of your Costco in socks because you took your shoes off in the car for some reason and never put them back on. Cart parked at an angle. A woman 3 feet away deciding between 2 rotisserie chickens like it's a referendum on her entire week, and you are holding a jar of moisturizer that costs less than your oat milk latte, and you feel, faintly, defensively, like you are getting away with something, like the real cream, the good cream, must be somewhere else. Somewhere with marble counters, and a woman in a white coat who calls you dear and hands you a sample in tissue paper. You have felt this in 100 stores over the years, and I promise you, it is not really about the cream. It is about what we have all quietly agreed a good cream is supposed to look like. I need you to let go of that feeling right now, because it is quietly costing you money, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes proving it to you, item by item, brand by brand, with receipts. Stay with me all the way to the last pick, because it isn't just a good product. It turns out the fanciest name on this entire list and the plainest tub on this entire list are made by the exact same company. Same boardroom, same shareholders. Once I show you that thread, you will not be able to walk down a skincare aisle the same way again. Here is the one thing I want you to carry through all 8 of these, because it is the whole argument, and it happens to be something I learned watching shelves, not reading press releases. A price tag tells you almost nothing about a formula. It tells you about the building the company operates out of, the actress in the commercial, the weight of the glass. In Korea, this is not a controversial idea. It's simply how the shelf works. You will find a $9 essence sitting directly beside a $90 one from the same laboratory, and nobody there pretends the $90 one is 9 times the science. Selwasu and Innisfree sit under the exact same corporate roof. One comes in a hand-finished lacquer bottle. The other comes in plastic you'd find at any drugstore. I have held both of them side by side more times than I can count, and the honest truth is that most of the gap between them is the bottle. So when I tell you that Costco quietly carries products that celebrities and their makeup artists actually reach for, I don't mean it as some scrappy underdog story. I mean it literally. Read the ingredient deck, not the shelf it happens to be sitting on. The shelf lies constantly. The deck almost never does. And whatever you decide to buy after today, hold on to this. Your skin has never once read a price tag. Let's start at number 8 with something so unglamorous you have probably tossed a dozen tubes of it into the bottom of a handbag without a second thought. Burt's Bees lip balm, sold at Costco in a multi-pack for less than 1 balm costs at a department store counter. Here's why it earns a spot on a list about celebrities. And not just tired moms like the rest of us. Makeup artists have used a thick, waxy emollient balm like this for decades as the quiet first layer under lipstick, because chapped, flaking lips ruin a close-up photograph faster than almost anything else on a face. Now the reveal, because I promised you these. Burt's Bees has not been an independent little company making candles and lip balm out of a farmhouse in Maine since 2007. It is owned by Clorox. Yes, that Clorox, the bleach and pine sol company. That doesn't make the formula worse. Beeswax, vitamin E, and peppermint oil are still beeswax, vitamin E, and peppermint oil, regardless of who signs the annual report. But it should permanently retire the idea that every tube comes from a small honey farm. Number 7 is not glamorous either, and honestly, that's rather the point. Kirkland Signature Minoxidil, Costco's own store brand hair regrowth treatment. Hair thinning is one of the most quietly guarded topics in an industry built on hair regrowth, extensions, and very forgiving. Lighting cover a great deal on camera, but plenty of people whose living depends on their hair are using a topical minoxidil treatment at home behind the scenes. And the active ingredient in Costco store brand is the identical 5% minoxidil solution you would pay considerably more for under a well-known name brand at any pharmacy. There is no corporate reveal here, no parent company plot twist. It is simply Costco manufacturing its own version of an off-patent drug and selling it close to cost. Sometimes the boring explanation is the true one. And this is one of those times. Number 6 has been sitting in medicine cabinets since long before your grandmother's grandmother was born. Vaseline in a Costco multi-pack of jars that will genuinely outlast a decade of your life. Backstage at fashion shows, a tub of plain petroleum jelly has always been the unglamorous workhorse of the kit. Smoothed over lashes to condition them, that high on the cheekbones for that dewy, almost wet highlight you see in editorial photos, pressed onto lips under gloss to keep them from cracking under hot studio lights for 6 hours straight. Vaseline is owned by Unilever, which is not a secret and not a scandal. Unilever also owns Dove, among many other things, and the chemistry of petroleum jelly itself hasn't meaningfully changed since it was first patented back in 1872. What has changed is what people now do with it, which brings me directly to the next one. And this is where the internet, of all places, borrowed a page directly from a much older Korean idea about sealing moisture in rather than fighting to get it to absorb. Number 5, and I want you to actually lean in for this, because it involves a word you have almost certainly heard on your phone without knowing where it came from. Plugging. That's the practice of sealing your entire nighttime routine under one thick, occlusive layer before bed, so that none of the moisture you just applied evaporates while you sleep. The English name for that technique is generally credited to an online skincare community built around Asian beauty routines. Not to any single lab or brand, but the underlying idea, using a heavy balm to lock hydration into the skin overnight, is something Korean skincare has quietly practiced under other names for a very long time. Costco sells the genuinely enormous tub of Aquaphor healing ointment that became something like the unofficial mascot of that trend at a fraction of what a small pharmacy tube costs per ounce. Aquaphor is made by Beiersdorf, the German company that also owns both Eucerin and Nivea. So if you have ever used any of those three and felt like the textures had a certain family resemblance, that's because they genuinely do. One parent company, 3 different medicine cabinets. Number 4 is the cleanser dermatologists have been quietly recommending to actual patients, not to a camera, for longer than most of the brands on this entire list have existed. Cetaphil Gentle Skin Cleanser, sold at Costco in a pump bottle roughly the size of a small fire extinguisher. For a price per ounce that makes most department store cleansers look almost embarrassing by comparison, Cetaphil is owned by Galderma, a dermatology-focused company, which is precisely why the formula has stayed so deliberately boring. No added fragrance to react against, no harsh sulfates to strip the skin barrier, nothing for a redness-prone face, or a face newly introduced to retinol to argue with. In an industry obsessed with loud, active ingredients, in an industry obsessed with loud, active ingredients, sometimes the smartest move is a cleanser that does almost nothing except leave your face alone, and that kind of restraint is worth far more than most people give it credit for. Number 3 moves us into actual anti-aging territory, and it's the one I get the most pushback on because Olay still carries a certain drugstore stigma left over from decades ago. Olay Regenerist sold at Costco in a jar roughly triple the size of what you'd get at a pharmacy for barely more money. Olay is owned by Procter & Gamble, one of the largest consumer goods companies on the planet, with a research budget that most independent skincare brands could only dream about, and the Regenerist formulas carry a real, meaningful concentration of niacinamide and peptides, not homeopathic trace amounts, but the same categories of ingredient prestige brands charge you 10 times as much to deliver. I am not telling you it performs identically to every $300 cream on shelves right now. I am telling you the actual performance gap is far smaller than the price gap, and your skin barrier has never once cared what the jar looked like sitting on your counter. Number 2 is where things start to get genuinely interesting. So pay close attention here because it sets up everything I promised you at the beginning. La Roche-Posay, the French pharmacy brand, with the unmistakable blue and white packaging, the one dermatologists recommend so often, it has practically become a punchline in their own offices. Costco periodically stocks their Anthelios sunscreen, and Toleriania cleansers in bulk sets at meaningfully lower prices than you'll find at any pharmacy counter. And I want to be completely clear that sunscreen is the one product on this entire list where I would never, under any circumstance, tell you to cut a corner or buy less because of price. Buy the good sunscreen, always in whatever size actually gets you to reapply it. La Roche-Posay built its entire reputation formulating for sensitive post-treatment and post-procedure skin, and it is literally named after the small French spa town whose thermal spring water goes into their product. And La Roche-Posay has been owned since the late 1980s by L'Oréal. Hold on to that thread. It pays off in about 30 seconds because number 1 is CeraVe, the moisturizing cream in the tub with the tiny plastic spatula that at least half of you already own right now, sold at Costco in a 2-pack. So large it should probably require a permit to bring into the house. Here is the payoff. CeraVe was developed in 2005 in partnership with a group of dermatologists, built around 3 ceramides that your own skin barrier naturally produces and steadily loses as you age, delivered through a slow-release technology designed to keep working for hours rather than sitting flat on the surface and evaporating. It quietly became the product every makeup artist and every dermatologist's office kept in a back drawer long before it became a fixture of every celebrity get ready with me video and bathroom cabinet tour on the internet. And in 2017, the parent company behind CeraVe was purchased by L'Oréal for more than $1 billion. The same L'Oréal that owns La Roche-Posay, which means the elegant French pharmacy brand at number 2 in its refined blue box and the plain American tub at number 1. Sitting in your bathroom right now, both ultimately answer to the same headquarters outside Paris. One is dressed for a magazine spread. The other is dressed for your bathroom shelf under fluorescent light. And your skin, again, has never once read a price tag. It has never known which one belonged to which parent company. It has only ever known what was actually in the jar. So how do you actually shop this the next time you're pushing a cart past the rotisserie chickens? A few plain habits, nothing dramatic. First, buy your everyday cleanser and your everyday moisturizer in bulk without guilt and save your real money for the 2 categories where formulation genuinely does get more sophisticated as price climbs. A targeted serum built around a specific active you've actually researched, and in-office treatments if and when that's within reach for you. The daily use category is where the real guilt-free savings live. Second, when you do bring home something rich, like the Aquaphor or the CeraVe, layer it the way Korean routines have quietly taught the rest of the world to layer for years now. Thinnest, most watery texture first, thickest, heaviest texture last, and pat each layer in with your fingertips rather than dragging it across your face so it actually has a chance to absorb instead of sitting on top and transferring straight onto your pillowcase. Third, if you're using any real active ingredient, a retinoid, an exfoliating acid, pair it with one of these gentle, unscented cleansers rather than a foaming one, because most people who swear a product stopped working actually just irritated their own barrier with something else already sitting in their routine. And fourth, stop assuming expensive packaging automatically means a stronger formula underneath it. Read the actual ingredient list in order the way you'd read a nutrition label and compare it honestly to what's already sitting in your cart. Half the time you'll discover you already own the good stuff. Now, a few honest notes, because I would much rather you hear these from me than get caught out and blame me later. Costco's inventory rotates constantly, and it varies by region and even by season. Something I've mentioned here might be a seasonal item at your specific warehouse or an online-only listing, or simply not carried at all where you live. Treat this as a map of what's genuinely worth hunting for, not a guaranteed shopping list you can walk in and check off item by item. If you're trying any active ingredient for the first time, a stronger niacinamide percentage, a new acid, anything with real activity, patch test it on your inner arm first, exactly the way you would with any new skincare, bulk size or not. And please do not hear anything I've said today as permission to be casual about sunscreen. Specifically, buying it in bulk is exactly the right instinct. Buying less of it or a weaker version of it because it happens to be cheap is exactly the wrong one. And one more thing, since I know some of you are already composing an angry comment, I am not claiming any specific celebrity personally handed me a receipt. What I am telling you is what makeup artists, dermatologists, and industry insiders have said publicly over and over for years about what actually sits in their kits when the cameras are off. Here is the bigger picture, and it's the one thing I actually want you to leave with today. Almost everything on a beauty shelf, expensive or cheap boutique or big box, it sits inside one of about 5 or 6 enormous parent companies: L'Oreal, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Beiersdorf, Clorox of all improbable companies, and a small handful of others, quietly competing against their own products in different packaging at wildly different price points, sold to different customers who never once compare notes with each other. That was always going to be true. Whether you shopped at a warehouse club or at a marble department store counter, and it is just as true walking through a department store in Seoul, where Emil Pacific quietly owns everything from the humble drugstore aisle to the glass towers of duty-free. I say this not to let anyone off the hook, but to be honest with you, Korean beauty is not exempt from this game. It simply plays it a little more openly. Being owned by a giant was never actually the danger. The real danger was assuming a small, independent-looking label meant something it didn't, and that a big, boring warehouse tub meant less than it actually does. The formula never once knew which shelf it was sitting on. It only ever knew what was truly inside the jar. And increasingly, at your local Costco, what's inside that jar is exactly what you'd pay 10 times more for, somewhere with better lighting and a nicer chair. Tell me in the comments which one of these you already own, without knowing the backstory, and which brand you're finally ready to stop overpaying for now that you know exactly who's behind it. If this kind of investigation is useful to you, subscribe, because this is precisely what this channel exists to do. I go behind the counter so you don't have to guess. Next time, I'm doing the exact opposite of this list. The celebrated K-beauty products everyone assumes are special, that turn out to be sitting on the exact same laboratory shelf as something you already own. I'll see you there.